Deliriousness increases item rarity. That's been the general understanding for a while, even if exact numbers don't seem to be around. In the latest patch, GGG improved item rarity scaling per depth of Delirium encounters. But what does that actually mean? The further you move from a Delirium mirror, the more so-called depth increases. The more depth, the more deliriousness. And I dare assume the depth mentioned in the patch notes isn't actually referring to the physical distance from the mirror, but rather to the deliriousness level of the player. If this assumption is correct, it means that highly delirious maps should give us significantly improved loot. This video isn't here to make claims or, God forbid, make recommendations on how to farm. I'm just documenting my testing, which consists of comparing different percentages of Delirium to see if there is a noticeable difference in loot. This is also my first YouTube video ever, and I'm still pretty new to PoE2. I've got around 300 hours in the game so far, and most of that was rather blindly following guides. If I say something wrong, I apologize, and I encourage anyone to correct me in the comments. I'll also leave a pinned comment, or I'll put corrections in the description if anything I say turns out to be inaccurate or wrong. Following footage is made up of highlights from my Twitch streams, so if you want, check out my channel over there. So let me quickly explain how I set this up. I tested two kinds of maps: low deli maps that had around 36% deli, and high deli maps that had around 66%. I know that 66 isn't really high in terms of what's possible, but it's a bit less than double of the low deli value, so I went with that. Also, all maps had either a rarity or a quant rarity roll on them. I ran maps that were displaying initially 30 to 50% quantity on them. I achieved those values by putting tablets into regions with overlapping towers. So this is my character rarity, 120%. In the very beginning I only had 100, but I switched pretty quickly. Here's also my atlas tree. It's wildly unoptimized, so you can definitely achieve better results if you really want. So I'll be sharing my thoughts on the clips I decided to include, maybe so you can draw some conclusions at the end of the video. This map here was really dopamine overload. So we get a triple unique precursor drop, and then a few seconds later in the same map we get a double unique precursor drop. Among those tablets we have two of those that only remove irradiation on map completion, so you can rerun the maps. Those are so liquid that you can basically treat them as raw currency. This low deli map though, despite having pretty good modifiers, gave literally nothing. Around map 7 we see the first map that drops two divines. The first one being from Omniphobia kinda reinforces that instilling your maps is a good idea, at least if your build can handle it. And the second one just drops from the boss. Day 2 of testing started off with a divine dropping from the boss, and I have to say this really motivated me, since pre-patch it seemed like you could choose your maps all you wanted and they could still be random as hell, but now deli maps really seem to pay off. It's about 12 maps in that we actually see a low deli map drop a divine. Then a few maps later, as if motivation wasn't high enough, we just get a perfect jewelers. And then a few seconds later in the same map, a divine drops. This was the second low deli map that just seemed broken to me. So this entire map dropped like two things that went through my item filter. And basically at this point my opinion about low deli maps started forming and solidifying. On day 3 we found a map that had 0 quantity and 220% rarity. I usually don't really like those because they can be like super inconsistent, and I've even ran maps that had higher rarity than this and they wouldn't drop anything, but this one delivered and just dropped as a div. Map number 22 was basically the first higher deli map that felt weird to me, as despite having good or decent modifiers, all it dropped was one chaos. We managed to get a div from a boss on this low deli map, which didn't really have the best roll I've ever seen, but 80 quantity and 50 rarity apparently can be enough. When I did the map I actually thought I got pretty lucky, but 80% quantity is actually quite decent compared to the other maps I did. So in terms of modifiers, this map is like the jackpot, I guess. I would have actually been very disappointed if it did not drop a divine, but it did, so my expectations for this map were met. Alright, and that's the highlights. Out of the 41 maps, only about 15 actually had above 60% Delirium. I invested 5 divines. This includes cost for omens, distilled emotions, and the tablets used. This isn't an entirely correct calculation though, as the used tablets actually cover a way larger area than what we did, and they were a substantial cost of this. All I wanted to check that had to do with cost is whether we'd make the investment back anyway, and as you can see, we definitely did. We managed to drop 11 raw divines, 1 perfect jewelers, 86 chaos, which at the moment is pretty much 4 div, 6 annulment orbs, and a fracture orb. I treated every map equally and didn't, for example, run the better maps with higher deli, and instead made sure to alternate between high and low deli. And now to return to our initial question, does delirium percent matter? Well, for myself I can say yes, I definitely did notice a difference. As you can see, most of the clips are from higher deli maps, so that's what I'll be running from now on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is my personal answer to does delirium percent matter. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed or could learn something from this video. Once again, if there's anything you would like to correct or add on to, feel free to drop a comment. I spent a lot of time on this video and I would love some feedback. If you think this video was helpful and I should keep making those videos, let me know by dropping a like and perhaps also subscribing if you want to see more. And if you thought this video was a waste of time and that it doesn't belong in the PoE2 community, leave a dislike. All I want is an honest review. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye.